Welcome to Back in the Groove, and welcome back to those who have been watching my content. But if you're new here, my name is Keith, and I'm getting back into vinyl after having my collection in storage for more than 25 years. And I've been doing a series of videos around specific years where I show my collection off for the albums of that particular year. And we're now up to 1985. Now, I've got to say, this is the biggest year I've done in terms of the number of records to get through, biggest number so far. So there is a lot to get through, and that will mean that I'm not going to hang around too much on what I'm going to show you. But let's get in right away and see what the first album is. And the first album is The Power Station. This was a bit of a pop supergroup with Robert Palmer. We've got John Taylor and Andy Taylor from Duran Duran. And we've also got Tony Thompson, although I'm not familiar with his work, if I'm honest. This was a great sort of pop record, especially Some Like It Hot was an absolute classic, and a really good album for any fans, particularly of Robert Palmer. Next up, we've got Wasp with The Last Command. And this was, I think, Wasp's second album, and some great tracks on this with Wild Child. Not as strong an album as the debut, but then what is the debut is such a fantastic album. This has got Wild Child, Ball Crusher, Jack Action, Widowmaker, Blind in Texas, all great tracks. So a really good album. We've got The Firm, which is the band with Jimmy Page and Paul Rodgers of Free and Bad Company. Standout track for me on this is Radioactive, not a bad album at all. Then we've got Sting, and this is The Dream of the Blue Turtles. This is Sting going solo after The Police. Was this his first solo album? Not sure. If You Love Someone, Set Them Free is probably the track that speaks to me the most on here. Not a bad Sting album. I'm not the biggest Sting fan, if I'm honest. Preferred the one that came later. Was it Fields of Gold, I think, or the album that Fields of Gold is on. But next up, we've got Hurricane, a really good, hard melodic rock. This is Take What You Want. And this has got, I was going to say Rudy Sarzo, but it's Robert Sarzo, which is Rudy Sarzo's brother, I believe. Rudy Sarzo was in Whitesnake, wasn't he? And then we got Kelly Hansen on vocals, who is great. And I think Kelly Hansen's been doing a lot with Foreigner, I think, recently, hasn't he? Next up, we've got a great live album by Triumph, the Canadian three-piece. Good live album representing really all the career. So, you know, you've got everything from, you know, Never Surrender, Allied Forces, Magic Power, Rock and Roll Machine, the whole career there. Next up, we've got a soundtrack. This is St. Elmo's Fire. And it's probably best known for John Parr's Man in Motion, or St. Elmo's Fire, Man in Motion, which is the standout track. But it's an unusual album, or maybe not unusual, but it's got some great other things on. There's a track called Save My Life by Fee Waybill of the Tubes. There's John Anderson on here. There's Billy Squire. There's Elefante, which is John and Dino Elefante, who are brothers, you know, John Elefante from Kansas after Steve Walsh left. So a good soundtrack there. Next up, we've got an Olivia Newton-John album, which is a bit of an odd one for me. And I don't remember too much about this, if I'm honest with you. I really liked the Physical album that Olivia Newton-John did, which would have been a few years before this. So this sees it in a bit more commercial, slightly raunchier sort of vein. Next up, we've got Shooting Star with Silent Scream, a decent band there. Then we're getting into hair metal territory with Treat. This is Scratch and Bite. Again, a decent album. I'm trying to think. Treat were they a German band or Swedish band? I think probably Swedish, but a decent album from memory. Dio with Sacred Heart, and this has got Rock and Roll Children on, which is a really good track, Hungry for Heaven. I don't think this reaches the heights of the early Dio stuff, particularly the first two albums with Vivian Campbell on, but not a bad effort. Next up, we've got another American, I think LA band. This is Rough Cut, and these are a kind of hair metal type band, I guess. Probably best known for Paul Shortino on vocals. Paul Shortino's got a fantastic voice. He later joined Quiet Riot, but he didn't have the best of careers. He's done some solo stuff as well. Sings a number of the prominent lines on the Stars single, you know, the kind of equivalent to the Children in Need song. I can't remember what it was now. The one Bob Geldof would do They Know It's Christmas, I think. So this was an all-star heavy rock version that did a track called Stars. Paul Shortino is on that and in the video, and a great voice. Next up, Stevie Nicks. This one is called Rock a Little. This was probably her at her height, her solo heights. I think this was after Belladonna. I think decent album. Next up, a bit of a cult classic, I think, King Cobra. And King Cobra are known for having Carmine Appice on drums. You've got Johnny Rod on bass, who went on to join Wasp, I think, on Wasp's next album. And then you've got Mark Free, who was the vocalist, a decent vocalist, did some solo work as well before transitioning to a woman. So he's also known as Marcy Free as well. And I think has released some stuff under the Marcy Free name as well as Mark Free. Rush and Power Windows, a great Rush album if you ask me. Just some great tracks on here, in particular Big Money is a favorite of mine. A Utopia album, POV, or I presume point of view. I'm looking at this and I'm not seeing any sort of standout tracks that I remember. I do like Utopia, but I'm more in the sort of Ra and Up's Wrong Planet albums. Next up, we've got Sad Cafe, Politics of Existing. I think this was probably the last Sad Cafe album. I think by this point they're down to kind of a core of two members with Paul Young and what's the other guy called? Ian Wilson on guitar. I think Mike Rutherford's actually on this as well. So whether that's before Paul Young joins Mike and the Mechanics or after, I'm not really sure how that worked. Next up, we've got Phenomena. This is written by Tom Gailey, who I think is Mel Gailey's brother. And this has got lots of well-known people on here. We've got Cozy Powell, Neil Murray, but most of all, Glenn Hughes, who does pretty much all of the vocals, if not all of the vocals. I don't think it's Glenn at his best, although this was pretty well received, I think. I think it's probably in that period where Glenn wasn't very visible, had a lot of problems with weight and things like that, and drugs, of course, and just wasn't particularly visible, but was still doing some work with the likes of Gary Moore, etc., who we'll see a little later on. Next up, we got Magnum on a Storyteller's Night. A good Magnum album, not a great one, but a really good one. The best Rodney Matthews artwork out there for me. I absolutely love the cover. This has got How Far Jerusalem, which is a great track, Just Like an Arrow, on a Storyteller's Night itself. Les Morts Dansant is a good track as well, so a decent album. Next up, Phil Collins with No Jacket Required. Phil Collins still in that kind of, well, probably starting to come out of that very melancholy kind of stuff that he was putting out on the first few albums. You got Susudio, which was a big single on this. One More Night was another of those melancholy singles as well, but not a bad album. Another kind of cult classic, I think, is Icon, or at least as a band. This is Night of the Crime, and a pretty, I think, decent album. I think this follows their highly rated debut. But from memory, I think this was a pretty solid album, maybe not as good as the debut, but still a good album to get hold of. Next up, Freddie Mercury with Mr. Bad Guy. Didn't love this album. This has got I Was Born to Love You on here, I think was the single. Not a massive fan of the album. Similarly, this one, Edgar Winter, Mission Earth, very sort of middle of the road, poppy, rocky kind of stuff, and didn't really gel too much with that. And then I've said before about Marillion, not the biggest Marillion fan. This is Misplaced Childhood. This is the one with Kaylee on. So this is the one that I probably like the most of the Marillion ones. It's got Kaylee, Pseudo Silk Kimono, and it's. I always like the covers and the artwork of the Marillion albums more than the tracks itself. Just never really got away with Fisher's voice. But speaking of voices, we've got a great voice on here, of course, with Phil Mogg. This is UFO and Misdemeanor. Not a bad UFO album, not the best. This has by now seen the departure of Michael Schenker and Pete Way. But we've got Paul Raymond still on guitar on there. There's a few good highlights on there, but they've fallen away from the highs that they had with Michael Schenker, I think. Next up, this was my first introduction to Yngwie J. Malmsteen, and this is the Marching Out album. And I remember seeing this on MTV with I'll See the Light Tonight, and I was amazed watching him, how he had these sort of guitar aerobatics. He'd sort of throw the guitar round his neck on his guitar strap, and it was my first introduction to Jeff Soto, and I became a big Jeff Scott Soto fan over the years. I've collected lots and lots of his stuff, and actually had the fortune to sing on stage in one of those rock star moments where I was kind of pulled out of the crowd as the best singer of the night, and sang a song with him on stage, which was an absolute blast. I've got a photo somewhere, and I'll try and dig that out and show you. But a good album. Next up, another great album for me. This is John Waite, Mask of Smiles. I'm a massive John Waite fan. I think this is the one with Just Like Lovers on. There's no what we got. Yeah, Just Like Lovers, Every Step of the Way, Welcome to Paradise. A really good album if you like John Waite. Next up, we've got the Tubes with Love Bomb, and I'm a massive Tubes fan, but this is probably my least favourite of the Tubes albums. It's an okay piece. It's got Stella on there is a good song, Piece by Piece. Night People, which they kind of did Night People, and then they reprised it at the end of side two as well. And I didn't really love that, if I'm honest. So not the best one to start with the Tubes if you're gonna give them a listen, but it's not too bad. Next up, we've got Helix, another hard rock Canadian band. Not sure where this falls in their discography. Probably third or fourth album, I think. And then next up, an absolute classic with Iron Maiden's Live After Death. And I've actually got a couple of copies of this. Got all of the inserts, the merch sheets, and everything with these copies. I think there's a nice booklet comes with this as well. So it's a really nicely packaged album. It's great artwork by Derek Riggs, of course, and some great tracks on here. Everything from kind of the Power Slaves era, everything from Running Free to Power Slave itself, Ram of the Ancient Mariner, Hallowed Be Thy Name, of course, being an absolute classic. Next up, Megadeth and Killing Is My Business, another iconic classic album with Dave Mustaine and the guys, and highly regarded. Next up, John Parr. This was a funny one for me because it was an album, I think, if I recall right, it was #1 in the album charts, and that was on the back of the St. Elmo's Fire soundtrack that I mentioned earlier. I'd never heard of him other than the single, bought the album and absolutely loved it. There's some great stuff on here. And I've kind of followed his career ever since, picked up some, all his other solo albums. He did a little bit with Meatloaf as well. Very proud of his roots. I think he's from Doncaster in Yorkshire, where I think he had a recording studio. Did manage to see him live, actually supporting John Waite, where he did an acoustic set, and he talked a lot between songs, and he came across as a really nice guy. He talked about that. Do you remember the commercial Gillette, The Best a Man Can Get? Well, that was a John Parr song in a commercial. And he talked about what, St. Elmo's Fire was about, etc. It was a really good concert and a real great insight into the guy himself. A bit of a connection with John Parr is that Saxon are also from Doncaster, I think. And this is their attempt to be a bit more commercial. I think this is where they moved to EMI Records from Career, and tried to probably commercialize the sound a little bit, and I think it's one of those that you either love or hate. Next up, we got Elton John, Ice on Fire. I can't recall too many tracks off that, if I'm honest, so I can't really comment too much. We've got Whiteheart here, who I think were a bit of a Christian band, if I remember rightly. There's a connection with Dan Huff, who's an amazing guitarist and producer who was in Giant. Now, he's not on this album, but there is David Huff, who I suspect is his brother, possibly. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but Dan Huff does feature on a number of Whiteheart albums as well. We've got Warlock, and this is Hellbound. Warlock is where Doro Pesh originates from before going solo. I think Warlock are pretty well regarded in the heavy metal world. I'm not the biggest lover of female vocals, and she's okay, but not that much to my taste, if I'm honest. I much prefer a singer like Ann Wilson, and even Nancy, who Ann is just an incredible singer. This is Heart, though, where they're going in a much more commercial 80s vibe. Remember all those Heart videos, which were, massive sort of productions, hair, real hair rock, shall we say. But good stuff though. Then we've got some Coney Hatch, Canadian band, and this is Friction. Good band, Coney Hatch, and worth checking out. Then we've got Fortune, and this reminded me a bit, especially the start of it, thrill of it all. I think was very Bon Jovi-esque, very Runaway, that kind of keyboards. But not a bad melodic rock album at all. Eric Martin, and this is Eric Martin's solo album after being in the Eric Martin band, I think, but before Mr. Big. And there's some people on here, you got Steve Lukather playing guitar on here. It's not the best album. I've got a lot of Eric Martin solo albums, and it's not the strongest album in my opinion. I think he definitely did the right thing in joining Mr. Big, but I do love some of his solo stuff as well. Next up, we've got Howard Jones. So this is more sort of electronic pop. Dream Interaction, Look Mama was one of the standout tracks. He sort of had a big chart career for 3 or 4 years in the UK. Not sure whether he was very popular outside of the UK. Then we got Fist and Danger Zone, more I think Canadian heavy rock, decent band. I think they also went by the name Mayo Fist outside of Canada, or at least in the UK, because there was a band called Fist already, so they had to go by Mayo Fist. Next up, we've got Streets, and this is Crimes in Mind. This is the second and last album by Streets, which features Steve Walsh on vocals and keyboards, and Mike Slammer on guitars, Billy Greer on bass, and Tim Gert on drums. And this, much like the debut album, is a great album, I think. Particularly Gunrunner is a great track. Rat Race, Hit and Run, Crimes in Mind itself, another classic album in my opinion, and definitely one to pick up. Next up, Dave Lee Roth, Crazy from the Heat. This is where we saw Dave Lee Roth doing California Girls, and particularly Just a Gigolo. I absolutely loved the Just a Gigolo video and all that kind of scat, almost rapping that he does in the middle of the track. Absolutely great stuff. More heavy metal, I think. Heloise. I'm not sure where these guys are actually from. I suspect they're German, but I might be completely wrong, and I don't recall too much about that particular one. Next up, we got Blue Oyster Cult, a decent album from memory. This is after Fire of Unknown Origin, etc. A couple of albums after that, but not too bad. Then we've got Urgent, and this was produced oddly by Ian Hunter and Mick Ronson. This is typical sort of middle of the road American rock, I think. Nothing stands out to me about it. I think it was a little bit dated, if I'm honest, for the year. Next up, we got Demon and British Standard, and not at the highs of Demon's work. I don't think. The early albums were really good. I don't think this is one of the better ones, but Demon are definitely well worth checking out. Saga, another Canadian band. This is Behaviour, and this is one of those bands that always reminded me a bit of Yes, that intricate sort of modern prog kind of sound, but more the vocal range of the singer, whose name I don't recall at the moment, but they always kind of reminded me of a bit of a Yes kind of band. Next up, we've got Kiss with Asylum, and this one features Bruce Kulick on, and this was a decent album, I think. And I don't know, was this the last one with Eric Carr on? I'm trying to think when Eric Carr died, but not a bad album. Next up, we've got Asia with Astra. This one doesn't meet the heights of the first two albums. I think the guitarist changed to Andy Meyer. I think Steve Howe had since gone. Next up, we've got Prince and the Revolution, and this is Raspberry Beret, I think. Is that what, or is it Around the World in a Day? I know it's got Raspberry Beret on it. It was a bit of a quirky sort of pop album for me. I was a bit of a Prince fan. Before this, I liked his earlier stuff, 1999 and Little Red Corvette and all that kind of thing. He seemed to go a lot more experimental on that, and a bit more psychedelic almost, which didn't quite work for me. Bon Jovi, 78,000 degrees Fahrenheit, continuing in the Bon Jovi vibe. Started to dip a little bit, not as good as kind of Slippery When Wet, etc. But still, riding the wave at that time, I think. Then we've got Todd Rundgren with Acapella. And I think this is a pretty good album, as always. Todd Rundgren's albums are a little hit and miss. So, depending on where you sit in what you like of Todd Rundgren's work is going to see how you fit with any particular album of his, but Acapella was a good one for me. Paul Young, not to be confused with the Paul Young that we saw earlier in Sad Cafe. This is Paul Young, who is very popular in the UK charts, and the big song from this was Every Time You Go Away, which was a big hit. Then we've got the Motels with Shock, and I've talked about the Motels a few times, with Martha Davis being an unusual voice, but one that I really like. And this continues in the regular Motels vein, and another good album from them. Then we've got Gary Moore, Run for Cover. Talked about Glenn Hughes earlier with Phenomena, and Glenn Hughes sings on a couple of tracks on this album as well. And you've also got Out in the Fields with Phil Lynott as well, and Military Man. So a really good, strong album, this, and probably my favourite of Gary Moore's rock solo albums. I think that was really good. Night Ranger. This is, of course, with Brad Gillis and the team. This is Seven Wishes, and another good album. Them establishing themselves as a real good rock band. Black and Blue, with their latest, which was Without Love. And then we've got Tobruk. And now this is a bit of a cult classic as well. I think this is a great hard melodic rock album. You've got Wild on the Run on here, and Falling, Run from the Night. A really good, strong album that's worth picking up. You probably see that in some bargain bins or whatever. a band called What Is This? And self-titled, produced by Todd Rundgren. Not the greatest kind of middle of the road poppy rock. Not really sure how to describe it too much. But then we've got Tommy Shaw, What If, which is a decent album. It's not as good as Girls with Guns. We've got Jealousy on here, Count on You, Bad Times, This Is Not a Test, etc. A decent album. And then Mr. Welcome to the Real World. In the UK, Mr. had a couple of good hits with Richard Page on vocals. I think the one of the singers was Kiri, and what was the other one from the other album? Was it On Broken Wings or something like that? But it had a good modern kind of pop rock kind of. I want to compare them to sort of Level 42, but they're not as British sounding as Level 42. Next up, Kickaxe, another good melodic rock band worth checking out. Then we've got some Faith No More. This is We Care a Lot. And now this is with the original singer Chuck Mosley, which isn't a bad album, but nothing like the standard that they would reach with Mike Patton coming into the band and coming in on vocals. Then we've got Halloween with Walls of Jericho, and this is with Kai Hansen on vocals and guitar. And I think this is the first album. I think they had a debut sort of single or EP, and then this album. Now, this is good heavy metal, good German heavy metal. I think they got better when they brought in a better singer for Kai Hansen, but then I think Kai Hansen didn't stick around too long. I think didn't he go off and form Gamma after that. And then we've got a Dokken album, Under Lock and Key, which continues with Dokken, making a name for themselves. Another good album, Unchain the Night, In My Dreams, Lightning Strikes Again. Good. A good album. Not my favorite Dokken album. I prefer the one that came after this. I'm struggling to think of the name at the moment, but good stuff nonetheless. Now, that's it for the albums, and I'm sorry for rushing through so many of them and maybe not elaborating too much on them, but as you can see, there was an awful lot of albums to get through. So what did you see in there? What was there that you didn't recognize? Did you know everybody in there? Some great albums. Which ones were your standouts? And what have I missed? As always, there will be albums that I will no doubt not have in my collection. I couldn't buy everything. But it was a big year for 1985 in terms of quantity, at least, if not quality. So I hope you liked it. If you did, do give me a thumbs up. And as always, I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel. But until next time, bye for now.